as our reliance on technology continues to further and further, what is alarming to me is that not many people seem to be aware how climate change can actually affect technology. And let's take something simple as heat waves, right? We've had more and more heat waves, longer durations, higher temperatures, and so forth. And even in 2022, many data centers were affected by this. So data centers are, facilities that have servers, right? And these servers have hard drives, and it's the cloud, right? That buzzword. We think of the cloud as this nebulous thing, but it's actually still a physical thing that we just happen to access from anywhere, right? Remotely. And during heat waves, it becomes not sustainable because those facilities need to be kept very, very cold in order to function properly. And that's not, as the heat waves increase and they're longer, they suffer outages, right? And so keeping them cool becomes a much more difficult task, right? And just even the idea of, furthering, in those moments, right? It requires more electricity, let's say, but more electricity also requires more fossil fuels and things of that nature. But in general, the grids get taxed, right? And we've seen what climate change can do to a state like Texas, right? Remember when they had their winter and all of a sudden everything was shut down because, they weren't prepared for it. Well, in many ways, it's also surprising how during heat waves, like California comes to, being blacked out because of the strain on the electrical system, right? And these are all just a few examples of the effects of climate change on technology. But we need to really start to grapple with that and be mindful of solutions going forward, because what we're talking about is literally our infrastructure, right? Now, as far as the solutions, I won't necessarily, it's beyond the scope of what I'm trying to achieve at this moment to go into those. I will say I am an advocate of nuclear energy, which I know scares a lot of people, but it is the cleanest and stuff like that. But that's a debate for another day. The point is, we need to be aware of these things because not many people, it seems, are. And, the more technology that we build, the more materials we take. And that, in essence, isn't the only cause of climate change and so forth, but it's certainly, one of the things that affects it. And then how do we resolve for that, right? So there's just so many factors that go into it that need to be considered. And if nothing else, the point of this episode is to raise awareness about that. Because it's scary, the fact that we're not too far off, like if things continue the way they are without actual change and whatnot, the fact that like a Google, right, and many of their like servers can go down. Like imagine if google.com was down. Imagine if youtube.com. And we've seen instances where this happens, right? Remember when like Facebook was down, WhatsApp was down, Instagram was down for like, 6 hours or so, and like the world panicked, right? And that wasn't necessarily due to climate change. That was more of a like literally one of the stupidest errors imaginable. But it does highlight our dependency on these things, right? And Amazon Web Services is one of the most used like server cloud storage, this type of thing. Imagine if like those facilities, just a portion of them or perhaps all of them, went down, right? Like we always like to think of it in terms of the economy. Like what would that do to the economy? So if you want to just think of it in those terms, like, it would be quite catastrophic. So that's a lot to unpack, certainly. And as I said, my goal isn't to deep dive the subject because I'm still, understanding it and learning more about it myself. And it's also not to cause doom and gloom and panic. It's more so through awareness, we can start to reflect and have meaningful conversations and start to look forward to possible solutions. Solutions that don't happen in a panic state, right? When you're in a fight or flight mode, you're not really thinking rationally, right? And so this requires good, deep introspection and figuring out, okay, how to move forward, right? And, this is important because our reliance on technology just continues to further and further. And, I know AI is a big talking point lately, but it also requires a lot of resources and money to be able to utilize, which is fine in theory. But what happens when we become so, ingrained with it? And what if it goes down, right? So these are important questions to ask, and it's like that boundary, let's say, of that space between something happening and not happening is getting thinner and thinner, right? Like, as I said, we've seen the effects of some of this stuff. Texas, I mentioned. As I said, California during heat waves is certainly straining the grid and things like that. I mean, I remember last year we were being asked, like, try not to run the AC between such and such hours to not overload the grid, right? So these are real issues. And they're only going to be part of our lives more and more. And, just another example, just to kind of drive home the point even further, because I keep talking about heat waves and technology. So I just, let's say earthquakes, tsunamis, fires, right? Like these things that destroy physical buildings, certainly human lives are lost, but we're just going to contain it to the technological aspect of it. As I said, we like to think that all of this stuff is outside of us, right? But it exists in a physical world. And yes, when you put something on Google, they should have redundancy, so that way if a facility goes down, like in theory, you haven't lost everything or whatever the case may be. But with more and more natural disasters and things like that, we only increase our chances of those redundancies failing, right? So these are real considerations to have. And as I said, the point of all of this is to make you aware. So thank you for taking the time to tune in. As always, comment down below with your thoughts, your questions. I would love to go further with this. As I said, this is just an opening of that doorway to have that discussion. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.